The following message is brought to you by Preaching Today, a resource of Christianity Today International.
Let's listen first to a sermon by Jeremiah Wright, pastor of Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago. Wright uses as his text the story of Hannah in 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 1 through 18. He has entitled this sermon, originally preached for the Chicago Sunday Evening Club, The Audacity to Hope.
Several years ago, while down in Richmond, Virginia, the Lord blessed my life by allowing me to be in that city during the same week that the annual convocation was being held at the Virginia Union University School of Theology. And it was at that convocation that I was privileged and blessed to hear the preaching and teaching of Reverend Frederick G. Sampson of Detroit, Michigan. In one of his lectures, Dr. Sampson started talking about a picture that I had had to study in humanities courses at that same school, Virginia Union, back in the late 50s. And Dr. Sampson talked about the pictures so beautifully and so powerfully that memories were brought back to me from those college days in the 50s. And he talked about the painting as being a study in contradictions, because what is depicted as the title and what is on the canvas seem to be in direct opposition one to the other. You see, the painting is entitled Hope. And it shows a woman sitting on top of the world playing a harp. Now, at first glance, that would be all right, for what more enviable position could one ever hope to achieve than being on top of the world, with the whole world, everything and everyone, dancing to your music? But when you look closer at the picture, that is, when the illusion of power starts to give way to the reality of pain, the world on which this woman sits, our world, that is a world which is torn by war, destroyed by hate, decimated by despair, and devastated by distrust. The world on which she sits is on the very brink of destruction. Famine ravishes millions of the inhabitants of this world in one hemisphere, while feasting and gluttony are enjoyed by inhabitants of another hemisphere. A time bomb ticking is the world on which she sits, with apartheid in one hemisphere and apathy in the other hemisphere, and enough nuclear warhead scientists tell us to wipe out all forms of life except for cockroaches. That is the world on which this woman sits. A world which cares more about bombs for the enemy than it does about bread for the hungry. A world that is still more concerned about the color of skin than it is about the content of character. A world more finicky about the texture of hair or what's on the outside of your head than it is about the quality of education or what's on the inside of one's head. That is the world on which this woman sits. You and I think of being on top of the world as being in heaven. But when you look at the woman on Watt's painting a little closer, what you discover is that this woman is in hell. And the artist, Watt, dares to entitle the painting Hope. Then on top of that, she's sitting there in rags, tattered clothes, as if she herself had been at Hiroshima or Nagasaki. Her head is bandaged, and the blood is beginning to seep through the bandages. Scars and cuts are visible on her face, her arms, and her leg. That's when you look closer at the picture. And the instrument on which she plays, her harp, has all but one of its strings broken, torn, or ripped out. Even the instrument has been damaged by what she has been through, and she is more the classic example of quiet despair than anything else. Yet the artist dares entitle the painting Hope. When you look closer at what Watt has done on that canvas, the illusion of power sitting on top of the world gives way to the reality of pain. And isn't that the way it is with so many of us? Oh, we give the illusion of being in an enviable position, being on top of the world. But when you look closer at our lives, what you begin to find is the reality, many times, of a pain almost too deep for the tongue to tell. Like that woman in Watt's painting, what looks like being in heaven is actually, for many of us, existing in a quiet hell. I've been pastoring for 17 years. I've seen too many of these cases not to know what I'm talking about. I've seen married couples where the husband has a girlfriend in addition to his wife. And it's sort of something nobody talks about anymore. You smile and pretend you don't hear the whispers and the gossip, and you remember that you've got the legal papers on him and that he would rather try to buy Fort Knox than to get a divorce from you. That's a living hell. I've seen married couples where the wife has discovered that somebody else cares for her as a person and not just as a cook, the maid, the jitney service, and the call girl service all wrapped into one. But then there's the scandal, what folk might say, and the scandal of the children. That's a living hell. I've seen divorcees whose dreams have been blown to bits, families broken up beyond repair, whose lives seem now somehow to have slipped right through their fingers. They've lost complete control. That's a living hell. I've seen college students who give the illusion of being on top of the world. Designer clothes, all the sex they want, all the cocaine or marijuana or drugs, all the trappings of having it all together on the outside, and empty and shallow and hurting and lonely and afraid on the inside. Many times what looks good on the outside, the illusion of being in power, the illusion of sitting on top of the world, when you get closer, is actually existing in a quiet hell. And that is exactly where Hannah is in 1 Samuel, the first chapter, the first 18 verses. Hannah is top dog in this three-way relationship between herself, Elkanah, and Peninnah. Her husband loves her more than he loves his other wife and their children. He tells her that he loves her. And a lot of husbands don't do that. He shows her that he loves her, and many husbands never get around to doing that. In fact, it is his attention to her and devotion that caused Peninnah to be so angry and to stay on her case so constantly. Jealous. Jealousy will get a hold of you, and you can't let it go because it won't let you go. Peninnah stayed on her, like we say, as white on rice. Stayed on her constantly, picking at her, making her cry, taking her appetite away. At first glance, Hannah's position seems enviable. She had all the rights and none of the responsibilities. No diapers to change, no beds to sit up beside at night, no noses to wipe, no nothing else is to wipe either. No babies draining you of your milk and demanding feedings. Hannah had it all, top dog. No baby portions to fix at meal times. Her man loved her. Everybody knew he loved her. He loved her more than anything or anybody. That's why Peninnah hated her so much. Now, except for this second wife bit, which was legal back then, Hannah was sitting on top of the world until you look closer. When you look closer, what looked like being in heaven was actually existing in a quiet hell. She not only had the pain of a bitter woman to contend with, but verse 7 says non-stop Peninnah stayed on her. She not only had that pain of a bitter woman, she also had, as in Bible days, another pain, the pain of a barren womb. You will remember the story of the widow in 2 Kings 4, who had no child. The story of a woman in biblical days with no children was a story of deep pathos and despair. You do remember the story of Sarah,